On June 25th, 2025, the long-awaited summer sweep-up came into the game, at least the combat part of it. I assume we'll be getting a skilling version of this later on. I was on vacation for almost 2 weeks, and of course this update came out right after leaving for vacation, so I do recognize that this video is a bit late, but regardless, I like making these game updates into video format because it helps me understand the content better, which I especially need with how big this update is, and also for the sake of completeness and posterity so that people can go back through my playlist of game updates as they take breaks and come back to OSRS, and they can get caught up by listening to these videos while they grind. Before we get into the summer sweep up, for a little bit of background info, to me, this seems like a continuation of Project Rebalance from 2024. Project Rebalance is, or was, or maybe still is, a long-term multi-update project that aims to rebalance and rework multiple older game systems for both combat and skilling, including many features that have been unchanged since before 2007. I made multiple videos on this, which are in this playlist of game updates. We went over the Project Rebalance combat, the Project Rebalance skilling, there is the run energy changes, and I think other things too. They have a timeline of events here with multiple blogs and the actual updates themselves. I don't believe the summer sweep up of 2025 is technically classified as part of Project Rebalance. I don't know if Project Rebalance is considered over or what, but this is very similar vibes. It's pretty much the same thing. They are reworking things that should have been changed a long time ago, changing and rebalancing older parts of the game. The summer sweep up though, at least this current one from June 25th, this is specifically focused on combat. The fact that they say combat here, I feel like heavily implies there's going to be a skilling one later on, but this was announced at the most recent Winter Summit about 4 months ago, and it is now in the game. Because I'm posting this over a week later, that means we've already had the next game update where they have fixed some of the things that were broken from the original game update. So as we go through this, I will talk about what the changes were and the things that have been hot fixed since then. Now this part, the change log, this is a summary of the changes. Each of these bullet points is a change to the game. We still haven't even gotten to the main news post where they go in depth with all these things. These are all the changes. Okay, and now we begin the summer sweep up, combat, PVM, and loot changes, starting off with Raids 3. Protect from melee now mitigates all damage at Baba unless you have invocations that reduce the effectiveness of protection prayers. Originally, when you were using Protect from melee at Baba, the damage would be reduced to 33%. However, this was changed in May of 2024. This was Project Rebalance, the combat changes. They reduced that from 33% to 25%. But with this most recent update, is now fully mitigated, unless you have invocations that say otherwise. This really helps to reduce the need to learn how to red X for Baba, and makes the barrier to entry for expert TOAs a little bit easier, whereas on the upper end, at very high level invocations, it doesn't devalue red Xing because you still have the invocations that will make red Xing necessary, like those 400, 450, 500 invo raids. As a side note, if you do want to learn how to red X Baba, the best way to do it is go straight into the monkey room on the level 0 raid, where you get unlimited deaths, and keep trying over and over until it makes sense. For the most part, most of these TOA changes end up making the raid easier. Like the next one we have, Baba now spawns 1 to 4 baboons rather than 1 to 8, depending on group size. However, there is a change here that does make it harder, but it's probably not that noticeable, which is that if Jungle Japes is enabled, baboons will spawn 2 banana piles on death, rather than 1. Here's another very nice change though. When Baba throws the boulder at you, you would be able to nullify the damage if you're standing next to the big rock on the ground, but you could also run up to a sarcophagus on the side and you would take 50% of the damage instead. You would share the damage with the sarcophagus. It was nice because it wouldn't one-shot you, so you could use it in clutch scenarios, but you'd still take a lot of damage. However, the sarcophagus will now nullify the damage that you take. Next, we have Akka changes. Protection prayers now mitigate more damage from Akka's basic attacks. This is especially nice for people that are using dehydration where they can't drink any brews and they have to rely more on the yellow Kara spec to heal them. Now they can wait a little bit longer before they're going to have to be forced to use the spec. Although if you're butterflying, maybe it's not as noticeable of a change. And by the way, once again, as a side note, if you want to learn how to butterfly Akka, I would again very strongly recommend going into the raid on 0 invocation and figuring out the timing on how to butterfly and building up the muscle memory from there. Akka now only protects against the same style that he's attacking with. Before this update, he'd always prey against 2 styles, which means you were forced to use that one remaining combat style, but now you have an option, which means you can choose the option that has more DPS. It also means that maybe if you mess up butterflying Akka and he switches his styles and switches his protection prayers, there's a decent chance that you'll still continue to be able to use whatever range or maging you were using against him for butterflying. And we've got Akka's stat drain effect now only affects combat skills. Akka's special attacks now occur every 7 attacks, up from 6. And then right here, Akka's enrage phase now spawns fewer orbs. I saw this tweet showing that there is a lot less orbs during Akka's, we'll call it enrage phase. And Mod Goblin replied saying that they may have overcorrected a little bit here, and they might be working to find a better middle ground. Akka's Stay Vigilant invocation means he'll use a special attack every 6 attacks as opposed to the base version 7. And there's actually more info in the summary section that I don't know if is in the main section of the news post, but it says, if Stay Vigilant is enabled, Akka will only swap the style he's attacking with when he uses a special attack, provided he's used a regular attack since the last special. Don't get hit, and he won't change styles. Then we've got some Kefri changes. Soldier Scarabs have had their magic defense reduced, Scarabs inside Kefri's encounter no longer scale their defense with the raid level, and Arcane Scarabs are now guaranteed to move after a certain number of attacks regardless of whether or not they hit. Then finally we have Zabak. Zabak waves have smarter interactions with pushback. I'm not completely sure about this one, but I want to say it's like when you get hit by the wave, you kind of get caught in it and you just keep taking damage over and over and over, and it can be hard to get out of that. So I think they sort of did something to help fix that. Those were the changes to the boss rooms. Now changes to the other rooms, the puzzle rooms. Cursed Baboons and Baboon Shamans now always take max damage from range attacks. To compensate, their HP has been increased slightly. If we look at the Cursed Baboons, it went from 10 to 30 HP, but then a week later it was brought down to 20 HP. And for the Baboon Shamans, it was brought up from 16 to 50 HP, but then a week later brought back down from 50 to 40 HP. They removed 2 waves from the Monkey Room. The volume of water required for Path of Krondus no longer scales linearly with number of players. This means you'll be able to make a mistake or two in larger groups. Slightly reduce HP of the Obelisk in the Path of Het. I believe this is going to make it so you don't have to spec with the Dragon Pickaxe in order to get the 1 down. And then the deposit box in the Nexus now functions as a full deposit box, which I believe people are currently having issues with because they accidentally deposit their equipped gear or accidentally deposit their full inventory. And that's supposed to be changed in the next update, which is actually 2 updates from this updates. After the puzzle room changes, we have loot changes. And if you want like really in-depth stuff about this, they have a link right here where you can check out their other prior blog. And I will have this news post linked in the description, so if you want to check this link out or any of the other links, you could go to this news post yourself. But as a quick overview, here's what's changing. The overall purple chance for raid levels beyond 300 is reduced. However, at raid levels 350, 400, 450, and 500, the weighting of Lightbearer and Fang reduces. They are going to change that though with the next game update in real time, which is 2 weeks after the summer sweep up news post, so that rather than just every 50 intervals that changes, it will interpolate. So that level 310 will have a slightly reduced weighting for Fang and Lightbearer compared to level 300, for example. Effectively, this means that the more you push up the raid level, your odds will be worse than prior to this update for getting a purple in general, but when you do get a purple, it is more likely to be one of the better purples. And if we go into this more in-depth blog, they do have all the numbers right here, so you can see this is live versus proposed, the proposed being what's in the game now, I believe. We have the average number of raids to meet the drop rate for a Fang and Lightbearer. Here's before and after. Here's for the Shadow, before and after. For a specific Masori piece, before and after, and then for the ward, before and after. The before and after for all these don't change until you get past level 300. You can see for level 300 it's the same before and after, but let's look at 400. That's probably a good middle ground to look at that some people might be interested in. So for Fang or Lightbearer, it was about 40 raids before to meet the drop rate. Now it's about 70 raids to meet the drop rate. And then looking at the Shadow, this is probably the most important one to look at. It was about 283 raids prior. Now it's about 350 raids to meet the drop rate for a shadow. You gotta keep in mind though, with all the other changes I've just shown that they've made to TOA, it makes TOA easier to do, it makes it faster to do. You should be dying less often due to all these changes, and in turn, you should be enjoying the raid more. And I believe overall, after all these changes, you may find it's about the same amount of time on average to meet the drop rate, if not even faster. Or at the very least, it'll feel that way because time will be going by faster when you're enjoying what you're doing more. And with all the changes, I think most people will be able to push up their raid invocation higher than they had it before as well. So all those factors combined, it at least balances out, I'd say. They've added a 4th jewel to TOA called the Jewel of Amascut, which, like the others, you attach it to the Charis Partisan, and this will create the Charis Partisan of Amascut. It is slightly less effective against scarabs, but has pretty big bonuses, and like a couple of the others, it only works within TOA. They've added this mainly to fill the gap for people that haven't yet gotten a Fang, so it's supposed to fit in between the regular Charis Partisan and the Fang, and the Hosta's already in between those two, but this is meant to be slightly better than using the Hosta inside TOA. They've also improved the drop rate of the jewels from 1 out of 180 now to 1 out of 50. This does still scale as before though, with the higher kill count, meaning for example, at 75 kill count, your base drop rate is 1 out of 16.67. And if you have any other jewels, this rate improves further. Before moving on from TOA to the next section, I do want to show you the Tombs of Amascut page on the wiki and go to the changes section. And starting from the very beginning, when TOA, I mean, you could already see there's a lot. Starting from the very beginning, you could see all the updates and changes there have been to TOA over the months, over the years. There have been many, many fixes, many changes, many quality of life things that have helped make the raid easier and more bearable for a lot of people. And this update, June 25th, 2025, and actually another update July 2nd, and we have another update coming with more TOA changes next week as well. This is paving the way for future new OSRS players to not have to go through the struggles that we had to go through, or future raiders, I should say. But back to the summer sweep up, TOA is done. Now we are moving on to elemental weakness and NPC defense changes. Okay, they talk about right here, they talk about Project Rebalance from last year. That was when they introduced elemental weaknesses, and they are going to be rolling out even more elemental weaknesses and making further adjustments to existing defenses on a variety of monsters. They have this very in-depth spreadsheet that we'll take a look at. So here we go, weakness changes 2025. Here's the current, here's the proposal, and then the delta. And if you look at the scroll bar on the right side, you can see there's a lot of monsters that are having their defense changed or their elemental weaknesses changed. There's a pretty long list here. But rather than trying to like go through every single thing or trying to even find specific things on here, let's go right here where it says, instead of trying to memorize every single one for elemental weaknesses, most of them have been applied according to the following rules. So you can get a general idea without even having to look them up. Air weaknesses can be found on things that fly or float, things with wings, ghastly ghosts, and spooky specters. Air weakness. Next is water weakness. This one is pretty self-explanatory. Anything that feels fiery. Demons, Tazar, chromatic dragons, with Vorkath being a notable exception. Earth weaknesses are on monsters that have tough exteriors. Drakes, worms, trolls, gargoyles are some examples. While they know that worms and gargoyles also fly, like they were talking about with the air weaknesses, they can only apply one weakness at a time for now, and they're saying that their rock solid exteriors define them more strongly than being in the air. And then last, fire weaknesses burn icy assailants and naturey nemesis to a crisp. So anything that's icy or a bug, you would want to use fire on. I did not even see this before. This scrolls even further to the right. There's also severity and then flat armor. Flat armor is a very interesting mechanic that they introduced into the game about a year ago. I think they introduced it with moons, actually. Whatever the flat armor number is, that means that the enemy will always take that amount less damage than you do. So if an enemy has 2 flat armor, that means your damage will always be reduced by 2. So if you hit a 10, they'll take 8 damage, for example. Monsters can also have negative flat armor, which means you always do 2 more damage than you would normally do. So if you were to like roll a 10, you would instead hit a 12 if it had -2 flat armor. This is a newer tool that Jagex now has that they can use to tweak monsters or bosses so that maybe they can make slower hitting weapons more beneficial, or make fast or multi-hitting weapons like Scythe or dual Hueycoatls be better in certain scenarios. It lets Jagex be very customizable with the approach that they take to adjusting monsters and creating the stats and whatnot of monsters. Of course, all this is a lot of information, especially with all the stat changes and the flat armor and whatnot, which the OSRS wiki helps a lot with, but a lot of people don't want to use the wiki, or maybe they don't want you to have to rely on the wiki. So because of that, they've added a new spell, Monster Inspect, to the standard spellbook. It requires 42 magic and has a little bit less information than the lunar spell Monster Examine. It's perfect for a quick look at elemental weaknesses, defensive and offensive stats, but it won't show some of the more niche bits like Freeze Threshold. It says it costs 2 Cosmic and 2 Mind Runes, but this was changed in the following update to be 2 Body Runes and 2 Mind Runes, so they switched the 2 Cosmics to 2 Bodies instead. The first thing I noticed is that Hueycoatl has been moved to the left side instead of being over here where it was before, because Monster Inspect moved everything around. However, in 2025, I don't think that matters whatsoever because we have the spell filtering, we have spell reordering, so who cares anyways, right? Let's see what the animation of the spell looks like when you use it. Let's use it on a cow. Oh wait, isn't that the same as Monster Examine on Lunars? I don't know, I haven't used that spell for a long time, but there we go. This is the information that we get. Yeah, and looking at the wiki page for Monster Examine, there's the animation. It does look about the same, maybe exactly the same, if not very, very similar. And then you can see right here, it says, it shows the things that Monster Examine shows you that Monster Inspect does not. And if we scroll down a bit further, you can see some more things between the 2 spells and more and more. Yeah, that is all for elemental weakness and NPC defense changes. Next section, loot table changes. In short, they are making tweaks to some loot tables with a particular focus on runes, high tier food, herbs, seeds, and gems. I will say right off the bat that it seems like from what I've read through or looked at on the spreadsheet, overall it does seem like a nerf. However, these changes are intended to reduce and redistribute the incoming volume of some resource drops, with the aim being to strengthen the value of these drops in the economy and to give them more wiggle room for future loot tables. They give an example here with Torsal Seeds. They used to be worth 50k GP on the GE, but with the addition of Muspa and especially with TOA, that drastically increased the supply of Torsal Seeds, and the price went all the way down to about 6,500 GP. This would mean that if they were to add a future boss or drop table that would drop Torsal Seeds, in order for it to have a similar GP value to like good Torsal Seed drops, it'd have to be 8 times as many seeds in order for the GP value to be worthwhile, or like compared to what it is now or what it used to be before. But that would just continue the plummeting price of Torsal Seeds and make them less valuable overall. So it's like they're increasing the supply, but they're not increasing the use cases for the Torsal Seeds. So if they're not increasing the use cases or adding some sort of like deflationary related thing to Torsal Seeds in this example, then really the best option they have is to adjust the drop tables. Let's take a look at what these drop table changes are. There's 4 tabs here. We got fish, gems, runes, and herbs/seeds. For the fish section, it starts off with Zora. It tells you the resource, what's being changed, if it's being buffed, nerfed, or adjusted, and then it gives you more in-depth detail. So for the Zora Manta Rays, for example, it says the drop rate is reduced for the food by 75%. That removed drop rate is then replaced with a shark drop, and when the shark drop is hit, it's 50-50 whether you get shark or twice as much shark chum. FYI, they actually ended up naming it shark lure, not shark chum, but you can choose to use 1, 3, or 5 at a time to significantly increase the rate at which you fish sharks, but you get diminishing experience per lure used at a time. So if you're using 1 lure, it's 27.5 XP per shark, or with 5 lures, it's 18 XP per shark, compared to the normal 110 fishing XP you get catching it. If nothing else, I would think at the very least this would make it faster to get the big shark if you're a collection logger, so there's at the very least that upside. I do think this is a healthy change for the game, not just because of Jagex's reason of trying to increase the value or the GP values of items in the GE, but also because it makes skilling more important and more relevant. Since the beginning of OSRS, when it became Slayerscape and they added all the raids and bosses eventually, it's become more efficient to do bossing to get skilling supplies than to do skilling to get skilling supplies. I think it all started with Zora and it snowballed from there. In the RuneScape 2 days, some of the earlier bosses like Calphite Queen, Dagnoth Kings, Grardor, these bosses did not drop insane skilling supplies like they do today. For this example with Grardor, I don't think they've changed the drop table of Grardor, so I think this is the same as it was in 2007. You did not go to these bosses with the mindset that you were there to make GP and profit from every single kill and get consistent GP every single hour you were at the boss. You would go to these bosses, here's Rex for example, you would go to these bosses specifically to get the big ticket items like the B-Ring or the Bandos Tacit or the Dragon Chain Body from Calphite Queen. Whereas the supplies that you would get in return as drops, all these average drops, these were consolation prizes. They would maybe make up for the amount of GP that you spent on supplies, so at least you weren't losing GP. So you know what? I am happy to see that they are incentivizing skilling very slightly. I know it's a very small change, but you know, one small change can lead to more and more changes, so I'm very glad to see this, and that is enough of my old man ranting. You can see for all these other bosses, or these Muspa, Vorkath, Laren's chest, Brimstone chest, it's the same as above. And while it's probably not going to end up being worthwhile using the Shark Chum unless you're going for the big shark, it's at least an example of a way they could incentivize skilling, and I hope one thing leads to another and they do more stuff similar to this. Maybe not this exact method of incentivizing skilling, but incentivizing skilling in general. You'll notice a trend as we go through these where all the things that get buffs, it's like very, very small things where it's like, oh, for every like 1 to 2 hours you do of Grotesque Guardians, you're going to get 20 raw sharks. Or for drakes, like a random slayer monster, oh, you might get 5 cook sharks 1 out of 20. Or for Thermi, once or twice per task, you'll get a 30 raw sharks drop. So even though they are buffing a few of the smaller things, overall it is a nerf. The Wildy bosses are getting their ruby and diamond drops nerfed, whereas Grotesque Guardians, Onyx bolt tips are getting buffed from 5 to 10 to 10 to 15. Wow! For runes, you have some pretty significant nerfs from the types of monsters that people really grind out a lot, like Vorkath getting Chaos and Death runes nerfed, Zora getting the Chaos runes and Death runes nerfed, we got Dust Devils, Kraken, Sulfur Naguas, TOA, Muspa, Callisto. These are all pretty significant nerfs too. And then you go down to the monsters that are getting buffed, and it's like Mutated Bloodveld Soul runes go from 4 to 10, or Grotesque Guardians, I mean, that's a pretty good thing, I'd say, because Grotesque Guardians, it's like, there's no point to doing them unless you're specifically going for the collection log, because the GP per hour and the Slayer XP per hour ends up being the same, about the same as fighting regular gargoyles, so why put in the extra effort unless you're a collection log hunter? I do think this is interesting though. They're adding the Aether rune catalysts to Abyssal Sire and Leviathan. And then, yeah, you can take a look at the seed and herb nerfs as well. I mean, I've already said my spiel, so you can look through here. Oh, Huasca. Oh, that's good. Another source for Huasca seeds. Or is that the only... I guess it's the only way they're adding to get Huasca seeds on here. I feel like you can almost tell they're being very, very careful about the Huasca seeds to make sure that they don't go down the path of every other seed in the game that's existed forever, since Huasca seeds are the newest seed that they've added. And then if you look at chambers, this one's interesting because they are lowering the quantity of herbs by 20%, dwarf weeds by 40%. And then I think you're gonna have a 50% chance to either roll an herb drop or a seed drop of a rough equivalent. It's assuming 7 herbs per seed. Going back up to the very top of the news post, they did make this PSA, the very first thing on the news post now, saying that there was a bug they've already hotfixed where all the herbs were replaced with seeds at chambers. Now 33% of herbs will drop as seeds. down from the original 50% following feedback. Additionally, the number of seeds received, except for Ranar, Snaps, and Torsals, have been lowered further. And you know what? Dropping more seeds in the game, or I guess it's going to be less herbs overall and more seeds, but by adding seeds instead of herbs into drop tables, that is in a way incentivizing skilling, because if you want to get herbs, or if you want to push more herbs into the game, people will have to do their farm runs. And people may even be more incentivized to do their farm runs because the prices of herbs may be going up due to less supply in the game. And the last thing they say in this section of the loot table changes is that they have considerably nerfed the spoils of war from Soul Wars to mirror the Castle Wars rewards crate. So it's mostly blade supplies, but the drop rate for the pet, the little creator pet, has not changed. So it will still be the same amount of time on average to get the Soul Wars pet. Moving on to Obor, Bryophyta, and keys. They say that people don't like the key system to fight Obor and Bryophyta specifically because of the combat achievements. You have to get 5 KC at Obor and 5 KC at Bryophyta, and to get a KC, you have to get a key, which is untradeable, and you could only get as drops from Moss Giants or Hill Giants. They want to make it so that people can get the KCs easier for the combat achievements, while also not adding more of the uniques from the 2 bosses into the game. What they've done is they made it so you don't need a key to fight Obor and Bryophyta. However, you will not be eligible for the old drop table unless you bring a key in with you. So you can fight the boss and get the KC if you want, but you'll just have access to a new drop table, which is very similar to the regular version of those giants. And if you brought a key with you, then after you kill the boss, you can open up the chest and get access to what the old drop table was with like the rune items or the Obor club or the Bryophyta's essence. On the new drop tables for Obor and Bryophyta, like the really weak drop tables, they can still drop their own respective keys. Originally, it was made to be 1 out of 32, but 1 week after this update, they changed it, so that is instead 1 out of 16. And same for Bryophyta, 1 out of 16. If you are going for keys though, and you're trying to figure out whether you should fight Bryophyta or if it'd be better to fight Moss Giants, you have to ask yourself this. Well, first off, figure out which Moss Giants you're fighting. For regular Moss Giants, it's 1 out of 150. Which would be faster, killing about 9 Moss Giants or 1 Bryophyta? If you're doing the Ironworth Dungeon Moss Giants, where it's 1 out of 120, can you kill 7.5 Moss Giants there faster, or 1 Bryophyta? Or if you're doing it in the Wildy, can you kill about 6 Wildy Moss Giants, or 1 Bryophyta faster? And only you can answer that question for yourself. And for Giant Keys, it's 1 out of 128 outside the Wildy, or 1 out of 64 in the Wildy. So can you kill 8 Hill Giants faster than 1 Obor? Or if you're in the Wildy, can you kill 4 Hill Giants faster than you can kill Obor? The answer is probably generally yes, especially if you have a cannon or goading potions. At the very least, it'd be a lot more chill, or make it really AFK with goading potions and /or cannon. There is a new item called Giant's Bones that are only dropped by Obor and Bryophyta. It says there's a chance for Giant Bones, but according to the wiki, it is an always drop. It is guaranteed. Let's try it out. I've got my Giant Soul Amulet from Royal Titans. We're going to try an Obor KC, but I'm not bringing a key with me, which means I'm not going to be eligible to get the Hill Giant Club. I get teleported right outside the lair. Let's open the gate and enter without a key. That's so weird. I really did not even know that people complained about having to get 5 KC, because with a cannon, that's like an hour of Hill Giants or a bit over an hour at Moss Giants. Or for really low level accounts without a cannon, they probably should spend a couple extra hours training on Moss Giants anyway. And also, really low levels generally don't even care about combat achievements. With the Giant Bones, you can't actually pick them up. There's only a bury or a take option. If you do take, it says, I don't think these will fit in my backpack. So you have to bury them or ignore them. And you do get prayer XP, I believe it's 150. It does give you the warning message that you can permanently disable if you want to, but let's see, is it 150? Yes, 150 prayer XP. So that could potentially be a benefit of doing that over Hill Giants, a little bit more prayer XP. And then here's the chest in the corner. If you did bring a key with you, you would now be able to open the chest after killing the boss. And again, the boss by itself just has a pretty weak drop table similar to regular Hill Giants. You may notice in the chat box there is no kill count. There's no kill credit that you get for killing the boss. I believe the kill credit comes when you open the chest. As it says right here, for the high scores, kill count is only obtained by opening their respective chests. And then a couple more things to note for Bryophyta. The Growthlings can be left clicked if you have an axe equipped, and the growthlings cannot spawn back to back. They now have a short cooldown. They did change Bryophyta's growthlings the following week to make it if you have an axe or magic secateurs equipped, you will one-shot them. There is one more thing. It says that you'll still have to use at least one key to gain access to their lairs. So I guess it's like a permanent unlock. Once you use a hill giant key or a mossy key, then you permanently unlock the ability to fight the boss over and over. Moving on, we have Duke. Following today's update, you'll be able to pick the mushrooms in Duke's prison 8 times, then they'll despawn. So you'll be able to stock up on 8 potions at a time. You need 2 potions per kill, which means you can essentially prep for 4 kills at a time. Or 2, 3, or 4, depending on your herb levels, if you have 62, 72, or 82 herb lore. They've changed it so that mushrooms will not despawn between each kill. To prevent players locking themselves out, you can't use mushrooms directly on Duke anymore, but you can still use potions and ground mushrooms. Left-click feed will work if you have dust and an uncrushed mushroom though. This isn't strictly intended and we might make further changes. And then it says for most players this will speed up Duke kills, so they've increased his HP from 440 to 485 to compensate. They've also adjusted the Duke speed combat achievements down by 45 seconds each, but they've also changed the behavior of the combat achievements so that they only begin once Duke actually wakes up, effectively making it so that prep is no longer part of the time consideration for the speed CAs. And one more quality of life improvement for Duke is that they've added a left-click feed option to Duke that will automatically use any potions or crushed mushrooms that you've got to weaken Duke, so you do not need to spam click anymore. After the Duke section, we have other boss and PVM related changes, because I guess none of these warranted their own special section. So starting off, we have some nightmare changes. They've removed a whole phase of Phosani's Nightmare, which means now the fight basically starts from P2. To compensate, they have lowered the speed times for the CAs for Phosani's by 1:30 each. The Sleepy Tablet, which is the teleport to Nightmare, is now a 1 out of 25 drop, and it's guaranteed on the 25th kill, or your next kill after logging in if you already have more than 25 KC, if you don't already have it. It came out in June of 2021, and on release, it was 1 out of 100, I believe. A couple years later, 2023, they changed it to be guaranteed on the 100th kill. And then with today's update, it's 1 out of 25 or guaranteed on 25. When you die to Phosani, you'll respawn just outside the instance now instead of at your default respawn location. And 2 updates after this one, they're going to be changing it for regular Nightmare as well. If you die to regular Nightmare, it will also appear outside the instance. Next is Nex. Nex will always perform at least 2 more melee attacks whenever she uses one on all phases, which only happens if the player she's attempting to attack is within melee distance. Nex can be damaged slightly beyond the phase transition threshold. For example, if Nex swaps phase at 2720 HP, you'll be able to bring her down to 2550 HP before she begins nulling all damage again. Nex's magic attack in her final phase will have its damage reduced by 25% if you activate Protect from Magic late, and damaging Blood Reavers will heal you for 75% of the damage dealt. The wiki only mentions this effect for specifically the ones that are summoned by Nex. It does not mention the ones in the lobby area. After Nex, we have some changes to Huey. Huey now drops uniques at a rate of 1 out of 18 instead of 1 out of 23, so all uniques are now slightly more common, and they've increased the weighting of the Dragon Hunter wand too. The Dragon Hunter wand prior was 1 in 207, is now 1 in 103.5, so the Dragon Hunter wand will be twice as common to get. The wand now has 40% magic damage and 75% magic accuracy bonus against dragons, and it can now auto-cast ancient magics. This is up from 20% damage and 50% accuracy prior. The tail now has 300 HP, down from 400. The hides now drop as a batch of 3, which is really nice because you need 3 hides to be able to build the master stash unit, whereas prior it was 2 to 3 hides that you would get. So whenever you'd roll the drop, there's a 50% chance you'd have to get the drop again as an Iron Man to be able to fully build that stash unit. The Huey hide armor pieces have had their crafting requirements lowered by 10 levels. There's some things in here that really aren't worth mentioning, so I might skip a couple here and there. The Blue Moon now spawns fewer tornadoes during their tornado attack. Personally, I don't even bother going from side to side, I just let the Blue Moon heal. The Deranged Archaeologist actually has a unique drop now, the Steel Ring. It has plus 24 stab, slash, and crush defense, and you can see the image at the bottom here for the Steel Ring. If we open up the collection log, you will see there's now a spot on here for Deranged Archaeologist. It had no uniques before. Now it has one, the steel ring. The only notable thing it had before this was some combat achievements. The drop rate for the ring is 1 in about 43. There is a fix coming for the text because the kill count text is supposed to be white, not orange. You could see with all the other bosses, it's white text, but for Deranged Archaeologist, it is orange for now until the next game update. Next, they have updated the Granite Ring to provide plus 12 range defense, plus 2 stab, slash, and crush defense, and -2 magic defense, which are all doubled upon imbuing. They have the stats image at the end of this list here. You can see the new Granite Ring stats and the imbued new Granite Ring stats. And we got a couple of fun facts on the Granite Ring page. It's the only ring in the game that requires a defense level to wear, and also it's the only item in the game that has a stat decrease after imbuing it, because, you know, it doubles the stats, but it already has -2 magic defense, and it goes to -4 magic defense. So hey, don't take this ring for granite. Or something. We've got some Cerberus changes. Adjusted Cerberus's fire special, so the lava pools, no longer deal damage in an area of effect. So you'll only take damage if you're standing on the lava pool. Next to the lava pool, you should be safe. And they will appear more predictably, making it a little easier to react to them and mitigate damage. So I'm guessing maybe you have like an extra tick, because I'm pretty sure before you had 0 ticks of wiggle room, you had to anticipate the lava pools coming. You had to start running on the same tick Cerb as spawning the pools. So yeah, I'm guessing you have at least 1 tick now to react to it. The Ward of Archaeus spell on the Archaeus spellbook now reduces prayer drain from demon attacks by 33%. This effect stacks multiplicatively with the Spectral Spirit Shield, and using Cerb as an example, if you pray against the ghosts correctly, they'll deal 30 prayer points to you. With the Spectral, it cuts it in half to 15, or if you're only using Ward of Archaeus, it cuts it down to 20. But if you're using Spectral and Ward of Archaeus, you only take 10 prayer points drain. The Keymaster Teleport Scrolls from Cerb now drop in batches of 7 rather than 3. And they even did the math for you. I was about to do it myself before I read the full thing. It says it should be able to sustain if you're able to complete 9 kills per trip. And they're also tradable. It was always kind of weird to me that they significantly cut down the time to DKs, but never ended up changing it for Cerb as well, because Cerb is like, almost as long as how the DK's run was before, assuming you knew where you were going. Except with Cerb, compared to DK's, your trips are way shorter here. So you'd have to do that run to Cerb a lot more often, multiple times per hour. We've got a change to Grotesque Guardians. The Rockfall attack will now only stun you if you're in the center. However, if you're next to where it lands, in the 3x3 area right next to it, you will still take damage. You just won't be stunned if you get hit by the AoE effect. The Tanal's Tix of Rallos has had its range increased by 1. On rapid, you could now hit 6 tiles away. On long range, you could hit 8 tiles away. I'm sure there's some use cases for this, but I do not know. Halberds can now hit flying enemies like Aviancies, including Kree'arra. It's really cool they're making the Noxious Halberd useful in a lot of places, or at least maybe not better necessarily, but as an alternative option, which depending on your gear, that could be better than what your personal options were prior. And I was looking at methods for Kree'arra, and I saw one the other day where it was a duo Kree'arra kill. They were both using Noxious Halberds, and they had a Soul Flame Horn. Ideally, you'd want 2 Soul Flame Horns from Yama, and you use a light bearer with it, and you use the specs from the Soul Flame Horn, and does some pretty good DPS, it seems like. I would love to try that someday in our duo GIM. This does also mean you're able to use halberds on Dawn when fighting Grotesque Guardians, and if you end up camping melee for the whole fight, you can save a good amount of inventory space by not having to bring switches. So you can try using Noxious Halberd on Dawn, and then also try using Lightbearer and dumping Crystal Halberd specs on P3 Dawn, and maybe see how that is for out DPSing the orbs. Demon Bane weaponry is now effective against Ice Demon in Chambers. Emberlight's probably pretty good to use there, I'd imagine. Desert Treasure 2 bosses now drop a gold ring whenever you hit one of the behind the scenes or the invisible vestige rolls. It will show you retroactively how close you are when you log in for the first time after this update and kill one of the DT2 bosses. If you're 2 out of 3, for example, when you log in after the change, you'll receive 2 gold rings on your next kill, unless you get a unique. You can now show your Zuck Slayer Helm to this Tazar guy to benefit from the equipped Zuck Helm for the DPS increase within the Inferno and Fight Caves without having to be on a Slayer task. You will not get Slayer XP if you're not on a Slayer task and you do Fight Caves or Inferno, but you will get the DPS increase, which is important for speedrunners, and you will not have an improved chance at the pet that you would normally get when you kill Zuck or Jad on a Slayer task. The Master tier had a reward where your thralls would last 1.5 times longer. They've removed that reward and instead moved the Grandmaster reward of doubling thrall length down to Master tier. So Master tier, you will now have doubled thrall length instead of 1.5 times thrall length. Halberd related combat achievements for Bloat and Corp now specify with a Halberd special attack, which means players with certain build types that were not able to get Crystal Halberd can now do those combat achievements with a Dragon Halberd. And we've done it. We've done it. That's really about all there is to talk about. I did see one thing down here that I thought was kind of funny that I did notice in the week leading up to this update. Wait, why is, when you click on crafting, it brings up thieving, or wait, it says thieving stuff here, but it's showing the so, oh, they had fixed that a week before this update, but then there was still like another thing that was wrong with it, showing that it was a members only skill. Anyways, that's been fixed now. Crafting is no longer thieving. That is it for the summer sweep up of 2025. Let me know in the comments what change you're most excited about, or if you've thought of any new methods that you can now do because of one of these changes. I'll have my playlist of game update videos linked in the description, which may be useful to some of you who are coming back to OSRS after one of your trademarked OSRS breaks. That tends to happen every few months on and off, or for anyone else who's been out of the loop with the game updates. I really hope the video helped you out in some way, but either way, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed, and have a great day.